Joe Biden himself says because of the war in Ukraine, we're closer now to nuclear Armageddon than at any time since 1962 because we're facing a proxy war with the nuclear armed power. The last time people were asked to vote on that was in May when the Biden administration requested $40 billion on top of the $15 billion that had already been authorized. Every Democrat, every single one of them in unity voted yes. It was 6 or 7 dozen Republicans who voted no. Most Republicans voted yes as well. How would you have voted on that authorization for $40 billion on top of the $15 billion back in May to fuel the proxy war in Ukraine?
I think if you're going to be an anti-imperialist, you have to be an anti-imperialist, whether it's an American or a Russian. And even though I don't think that the United States has had clean hands here regarding our relationship to NATO, regarding the Aegis missiles in Poland, I don't think any of that was a justification for this brutal dictator to make the invasion that he did. So I have felt that any withdrawal of support until very recently, would be simply to say that it's okay for there to be no more Ukraine. And that would be intolerable to me. But we have known, General Milley has said it, the RAND Corporation has said it, this is going to be a negotiated settlement. And I think we have a moment here where something might be happening. Xi talking to Putin, presenting some principles of possibility for a negotiated settlement. We'll see what Zelensky does and what Zelensky says about that. And I think the United States should do everything possible to support that negotiated settlement and a diplomatic solution.
So the posture of the United States government is expressed by John Kirby, the former Pentagon spokesman who now works in the White House, and other U.S. officials when asked about the potential for a ceasefire and diplomatic relations or diplomatic attempts to resolve the war has been, we're totally opposed to any ceasefire. We think that it would allow the Russians time to rebuild. Do you agree with that? Do you think that the United States and other NATO countries should continue to oppose a ceasefire and fuel the war? Or would you be in favor of kind of a Chinese attempt, along with the Russians and Ukrainians, to forge a ceasefire in the hope of getting a resolution to the war?
It shouldn't be John Kirby's decision. It shouldn't be the U.S. State Department's decision. I think we need to hear what Zelensky himself has to say. Zelensky has said that he is open, that he's interested. He wants to hear what the Chinese have to say. We know that Xi talked to Putin, but there hasn't been any report that he's talked yet, even virtually, to Zelensky. So, no, the United States should not be making that decision. The United States should be doing everything to support any possibility that's occurring here of a negotiated settlement in Ukraine.
So just to be clear on that, so many of Zelensky's statements, especially over the last 4 or 5 months, have become almost, I would say, more kind of maximalist, that he has no interest in ending that war until not only is Russia expelled from every inch of Ukrainian territory, but Crimea is wrenched out of the hands of the Russians as well. And he is willing to fight for not only months, but years, if necessary, in order to accomplish those war goals. So if the position of Zelensky is, we don't want to stop this war until every one of our objectives is achieved, including expelling Russia from Crimea, would that mean you would continue to just open the Treasury of the United States and continue to pour unlimited sums of money for as long as Zelensky demands it?
Well, first of all, Zelensky's comments the other day are different than the ones that you just described. So first of all, let's hear what Zelensky has to say now. And number two, no, you don't just open up the Treasury. I would never support any kind of like a blank check for this. We should be taking whatever actions will help a negotiated settlement, but I'd like it to be a negotiated settlement that does allow Ukraine to exist as a country. And there have been times when such a suggestion would not have.
No, I get that, but I mean, what are the limits that you would impose on the U.S.'s support for Ukraine?
I think we should be open to what. So I think that we should be open to any moment when there might be the possibility of a negotiated settlement that would allow for the existence of Ukraine. And I think, and like I said, we might be on the verge of such a moment. That's why what's happening now with China is interesting. We live in a multipolar world now. This is not about the United States just dictating what we want all the time. There are other powers. And it's like when Macron tried to make some kind of a negotiation happen, try to broker some kind of a deal. And I'm not naive about the Chinese Communist Party, but if they have some ideas on the table here that could maybe bring a negotiated settlement closer between Zelensky and Putin, then I think the United States should say, hey, let's hear what it is and let's do what we can to support that.
So speaking of China and the Chinese Communist Party, there was a big hearing held today in the House of Representatives. I don't know if you had a chance to see it, but it was about the Biden administration's announcement that it is essentially ready to demand that TikTok either sell itself to an American company or to business interests that the United States government trusts more than its current ownership, or just be banned outright in the United States. Is that a proposal that you support?
You know, I take surveillance seriously. I take surveillance seriously, stealing data seriously, whether it's Facebook or the Chinese. I do think it's a serious issue. The idea that your data is going right into the data system of the Chinese Communist Party. That's not like nothing. But at the same time, it's also, I wish that we saw that same kind of interest in what's going on with Facebook and every other country here in the United States, which should be regulated. So the fact that the conversation is on the table is not illegitimate. But let's see where it goes and what happens. I see both sides of that argument to some extent, but no, I don't think we should get rid of TikTok. I myself am as a candidate. I mean, TikTok is I thought TikTok, had its value before, and I certainly see its value now. And I think to some people, particularly the younger generation, we don't have to rush to an answer on every single issue the moment something occurs. It's okay to process something. And the larger question about surveillance and data mining is not something that we should avoid.
What about the U.S.-Chinese relationship, just more generally? Do you see the Chinese as a kind of competitor of American hegemony? Do you see them as something greater than that, say like an adversary, or do you see them as an enemy of the United States?
I want to stay away from any language like enemy of the United States. I want to stay away from anything even like adversary. We are a competitor, and we have and we have a lot of economic interrelationship right now, and we should continue to be competitors, and we should be looking down the road and hoping for the day when cooperation and collaboration on such things as climate change will be the normalized position. In the meantime, we have some real differences with the Chinese Communist Party, and we should not pretend that those don't exist either. But we don't need a Cold War with China. We don't need saber rattling. That's not where we should be. We should be careful. We should try to remain competitors, yes, in a healthy way, hopefully for that day where it is healthy competition. And in the meantime, we're not naive either about the Chinese Communist Party.
So one of the tactics of the TikTok CEO when testifying for 6 hours in the face of very hostile bipartisan questioning was to try and claim, I think often validly, that many of the concerns that were raised about TikTok, and you suggested this yourself in a prior answer, were also true of Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Google for sure, namely questions of how we're being tracked and how that data is being weaponized and how it's being sold. Another big concern about big tech recently from the Twitter files, but also other reporting, has been the attempts by the United States government through agencies like the CIA, the FBI, Homeland Security, to influence content moderation or censorship decisions by big tech. There's two sides of that argument. One is those agencies have no role whatsoever to play in how those private companies make those decisions. The other is, no, actually a lot of the content on big tech is a threat to the United States, and we want those agencies that are designed to protect us telling these companies what they regard as potentially dangerous, potentially harmful to American citizens. What is your view on sort of the Twitter files and the revelations of them and the proper role between the U.S. security state on the one hand and big tech on the other?
Well, I don't want the Chinese Communist Party messing with me, but I don't want the CIA messing with me either. So the idea that the CIA is going to protect me by anything it's doing at Facebook does not necessarily make me feel safer or happier. At the same time, if there is any regulation to be had regarding protection of privacy, it's much easier for the U.S. if it's an American company. So I don't want anyone collecting my data, but I don't see the CIA as the great protector of all things private.
Right, but based on things you've seen, do you think that is a real concern, namely that the FBI, the CIA, Homeland Security sees the internet as a tool, not for necessarily propagandizing other countries, which arguably is within the scope of its mission, but propagandizing Americans as well and interfering in our politics. Do you think that is a problem that they've been doing that? Do you believe that's something they've been doing?
I think it is legitimate to suggest it. I think that it is part of good citizenship to be constantly holding to a reasonable and appropriate skepticism about overreach by anybody, not only by the corporations, but also by the government. It's both. Neither one of them should be getting in our business in places where they should need to stay the hell out. And that applies to Facebook, and it applies to the CIA.
All right, let me ask you one more question about foreign policy before we just kind of shift right into domestic policy, which is, for a long time, on the kind of progressive wing of the Democratic Party, one of the major foreign policy debates was the question of the relationship between the Israeli and the Palestinians. The issue has taken on a little bit more attention in light of the foreign aid that the United States gives to Israel. Obama signed a record-setting deal with Netanyahu for billions of dollars a year that the United States transfers to Israel every year. The Israeli government is undergoing a lot of changes in terms of its ideological makeup. There are people inside the government who just explicitly say, we do not believe in a two-state solution. We believe all of the West Bank belongs to Israel. Would you, as an American president, continue to unconditionally provide that aid to Israel, or would you demand changes in Israeli behavior before getting that aid? And if so, what changes would you require?
Well, first of all, that $3.8 billion through 2008 is already codified into law. But we can use the fact that that is codified into law to exert leverage. There is behavior on the part of the Israeli government, particularly now, particularly with this extreme right-wing swing that they're taking. The United States absolutely has the right to say, if you're going to take any money, which, as I said, is codified into law through 2028, this money absolutely cannot be used in any way that transgresses against the democratic values upon which we purport to stand. We don't always do that perfectly here. I don't think any conscious person thinks that we do, but it must be our ideal, and it must be our ideal not only in the way we behave here, but in behavior that we support, particularly with our money and our financial leverage in other countries. The United States absolutely has the right to make certain demands about how that money is used. Absolutely.
Yeah, so for a long time, the argument of supporters of Israel in the West was, we're trying to facilitate a two-state solution, that the Palestinians should have their own sovereign state side by side with the Israeli state. If you ask almost anybody in that region at this point, people regard that as a virtual impossibility, largely due to just how many incursions there have been into the West Bank by what the UN and the international community regard as illegal settlements that would be almost require a civil war within Israel to actually remove. Do you still consider the two-state solution a viable solution? And if not, what do you see as what the United States should be pushing for there?
Unfortunately, I have come to realize that it's more dead than I had hoped. I had felt that the two-state solution was dead, but I believe in resurrection, you know? We are living at a time, though, when it is becoming less and less reasonable to even bring it to the table. I believe that the United States should be giving robust and equal support to both security and the human rights of both the Israelis and the Palestinians. And as you were talking about the possibility of something as horrifying as civil war there, 250,000 people were protesting on the streets of Tel Aviv recently. The efforts of the Netanyahu government to basically get rid of their Supreme Court. So the Israelis, I think, have come to a point where some changes are going to have to be made. So decisions are going to have to be made. I think not only the Palestinians, obviously, not only other Arab nations, not only many people within the left, within Israel, not only those of us in the United States who are concerned, not only people elsewhere in the world. Israel is going to have to address the basic fundamental moral flaw that is present. I want Israel to exist. But we are coming to a point where it's becoming very clear. It's coming to a head in a way more than it has ever before in the history of that country. And the United States has to stand on the side of human rights for all people. We must.
Thanks for watching this clip from System Update. Catch our full shows for free, live weekdays at 7 p.m. Eastern on Rumble, and join our locals community at greenwald.locals.com for all of my written journalism, exclusive after-show Q&As, and more.